As the NBA salary cap continues to rise year after year, we will continue to see higher and higher dollar figures attached to player contracts, absurd amounts even for high-level role players that make you question, are they really worth this much? And of course, like any major sports league, there are great contracts, those value deals where a player outperforms their salary, and then of course, those contracts that age very poorly, and a deal that teams probably wish they could have back. And throughout NBA history, we've had some historically bad contracts that make you wonder how the executive who handed out the contract in the first place even got their job. But how do you even assess what is truly considered a bad contract? And for a bad contract, was it a bad deal from the time that it was signed, or did it age poorly over the course of the deal? Well, in this video, we're going to be reviewing the worst contracts in the NBA currently and what makes them especially bad. As always, if you're new to the channel and you enjoy this type of content, I would greatly appreciate it if you hit that sub button to get us to our goal of 100,000 subscribers. Now, when it comes to assessing what constitutes a quote-unquote bad contract in the NBA, it really boils down to 4 factors: the amount of the contract itself, how many years still remain on said contract, the player's production relative to their annual salary or the percentage of the team's overall cap, and then finally, how tradable is the contract? Because what makes a bad contract even worse is if you can't trade out of it to get it off your books. And I'm going to start with a contract that I don't think is as bad as some of the other ones I'm about to discuss, but one that I do think should be talked about more that could end up backfiring down the line. And that's Jamal Murray, who signed a 4-year, $209 million max extension this past offseason with the Denver Nuggets. Now, to be fair to the Nuggets, they didn't really have a choice in the matter to give Murray this type of deal. Like, it was clear that he wasn't the same in the playoffs from last season. He was horrible in the Olympics, but they knew they couldn't hold off and see how things played out and eventually let him walk in free agency. And it wouldn't have been good for their overall relationship, and of course, they run the risk of losing him in free agency as a player that just helped them win the title the prior season. But given what we've seen of Jamal Murray this season, some slight declines in regression, in and out of the lineup from various injuries, he's never been an all-star and has been a huge benefactor of playing alongside Nikola Jokic. He's still a great player. He's definitely worth a big payday as a starting point guard in this league and a starting point guard for a contending team. But he's not worth a max contract. And the reason this deal is especially bad is that the new deal doesn't even kick in until next season, a contract that is going to pay him over $50 million a year annually on average for the next 4 seasons through the age of 32. When you compare the amount that he's going to be getting paid with the new contract once that goes into effect relative to what others at that level are making, like Giannis, Kevin Durant, Jason Tatum, LeBron James, and you realize, all right, Murray is good, but he's getting paid like an all-NBA talent, and he's not even close to being on that level. Now, next on the list, and this one is probably a bit more obvious given how things have transpired this season, but that's Paul George's max contract that he signed with the Sixers at 4 years, $211.6 million. Look, in theory, this seems like a fair contract for an all-NBA type player, perennial all-star, former MVP candidate, except for when you realize it's an incredibly injury-prone player who is in his mid-30s, and you're giving him a max contract through the age of 38. For a player with his injury history, who doesn't have many years left, giving him a deal where he's going to be making over $50 million a year when you already have so much money committed to another injury-prone player in Joel Embiid, it is front office malpractice. And you know, everyone clowned the Clippers for letting Paul George walk for nothing and how that was going to set the franchise back even further, a franchise that traded away their entire future, including Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, to get Paul George in the first place, all because they didn't want to pay him a max contract. Well, they were right all along. Paul George isn't worth a max deal. Not even close, really, especially with how poorly he's played this season, even when he's been healthy. I mean, relative to his production, Paul George is barely around that $20 million a year range, if that. And what makes this contract especially bad, unlike that of Jamal Murray, is that because he's old and is guaranteed money through age 38, this contract is essentially untradeable unless the Sixers want to attach a bunch of draft capital just to get off of the deal, which they don't have much of that anyway, given all the moves they've made in recent years. Now, to follow that up, the next worst contract on the list in the NBA also resides with the same team, and that's Joel Embiid, who still has 4 years, $244 million left on his deal. Now, no one will deny that Joel Embiid is a superstar in this league when he's healthy. He's arguably a top 5 player in the NBA, former MVP winner, and when Embiid signed that supermax extension, no one really batted an eye because that's the going rate for an NBA, all-NBA level talent. However, with Embiid now entering in his 30s with his injury history, and also the fact that, as good as he is, has not been able to get his team past the second round of the playoffs, and especially with the way this season has transpired, Embiid only playing in 19 games, and when he has played, has clearly showed some signs began to decline when it comes to his overall efficiency on offense and lackluster defense, it's clear to see why this contract is not going to age well and is making it one of the worst deals in the league, because it's very possible that Joel Embiid, after this injury, may never come back as the same player. And you're going to be paying him $60 million a year annually into his mid-30s. Like Paul George, a very hard contract to move at this point unless Embiid can get back to being healthy. The Sixers are in a really bad spot, let's just put it that way. Now, this next contract, let's go with a younger player who just signed their first deal after their rookie contract, and it pains me to say it, but that's the Bulls' Patrick Williams, who signed a 5-year, $90 million deal. Now, when the Bulls initially signed Pat to this extension, it wasn't seen as a bad deal. I'm sure to some Bulls fans it was, but rational minds felt that, hey, for a 22-year-old player, getting him locked up for 5 years at just a little above the mid-level exception and will actually be below the mid-level exception by the final year of his contract isn't that bad for a player that has proven, if nothing else, a solid 3-and-D player, which are highly coveted assets in this league. Like, even if you thought his offense was never really going to progress, you could at least rely on his defense. But this season, in just the first year of his deal, Pat has been nothing short of disappointing, and that goes for both ends of the floor. His defense has been average at best. He looks disengaged and lost on offense. A once reliable three-point shooter is now shooting a career worst 34% from deep. He's been making rookie-level mistakes on the court in year 5. And Patrick Williams has lost all confidence and doesn't even seem to enjoy the game of basketball anymore, and yet the Bulls signed him to a $90 million deal. Now, the only thing I will say about this contract that makes it slightly better than the ones I just mentioned is that at his annual salary and his age as well, it is a more tradable contract than, say, that of Paul George or Joel Embiid, especially in today's CBA environment. But regardless, this now is a very regrettable contract and one I'm sure the Bulls wish they could take back. But honestly, I don't think there is any contract in the NBA that is worse than the one I'm about to share, and I feel like this probably comes as no surprise to anyone, but that's the horrendous supermax contract of Bradley Beal, who still has 3 years, $161 million left on his contract. Bradley Beal, soon to be 32 years old, one of the top paid players in the NBA, but is clearly not the player, the all-star that he used to be, and negatively impacted the Phoenix Suns when he's on the court. For a player with his injury history, at his age, and is arguably not even a starting caliber player anymore at this stage in his career, making over $50 million annually is bad in and of itself. But what really makes his contract the worst in the league is the fact that he has a no-trade clause in his deal. One of 2 players in the entire NBA with a no-trade clause, just him and LeBron James, which gives Beal the ultimate say and control of where he goes, which quite literally makes his contract untradeable. An untradeable max contract for a player coming off the bench, can't stay healthy, and is on the wrong side of 30 is what makes this the worst contract in the NBA and arguably one of the worst contracts that we've seen in NBA history. Now, there are other contracts that are definitely up there in terms of being some of the worst deals in the league, like the contracts of Kawhi Leonard, Jeremy Grant. I would even say Jaylen Brown, given his production this season relative to his over $300 million extension that he signed. But none of these, in my opinion, are worse than the ones that I highlighted in this video. But I would love to hear what you guys think though, so you let me know in the comments. As always, be sure to subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.